She is the most followed K-pop artist on Instagram on the planet. She was born in a small province in northeastern Thailand, trained in South Korea for years before the world knew her name, and became a global phenomenon before she turned 25. But behind the performances and the records is a genetic story that science is only now beginning to fully tell. Before we dive in, comment where in the world you are watching from, and don't forget to click subscribe. Lalisa Manoban was born on March 27, 1997 in Buriram Province, Thailand. She was born Pranpriya Manoban and later changed her name to Lalisa. In Thai culture, that name means one who is praised by all. She grew up in Bangkok after her early years in Buriram. She trained in dance from a young age and in Taiwanese, and in 2011 she flew to Seoul at the age of 14 to audition for YG Entertainment. She was one of approximately 4,000 applicants that year. She was the only one selected. That origin story is well documented. What is far less discussed is what her geographic and biological origins actually represent in terms of genetic history, and what modern DNA science reveals about people who come from the specific region of Thailand where she was born, and more broadly from the Southeast Asian genetic landscape that her ancestry is rooted in. Buriram Province sits in the northeastern region of Thailand known as Isan. This is not an incidental detail. Isan is one of the most genetically layered regions in all of Southeast Asia, and understanding why requires going back considerably further than 1997. The Isan Plateau was inhabited by anatomically modern humans for at least 40,000 years before the kingdoms that eventually became Thailand were established. The genetic evidence for this, drawn from ancient DNA studies conducted across mainland Southeast Asia over the past decade, shows a pattern of occupation, displacement, and mixture that is extraordinarily complex. The earliest populations left genetic signatures that survive today in certain indigenous communities in the region, and those signatures connect through ancient migration routes to populations as far afield as Australia, Papua New Guinea, and the Andaman Islands. This is not a peripheral connection. It is a direct line of descent from some of the earliest modern humans to migrate out of Africa and move through South Asia into the Pacific corridor. The Andaman Islander connection is worth pausing on specifically. The Andamanese peoples, who have lived on a remote island chain in the Bay of Bengal for at least 60,000 years, carry a genetic signature that represents one of the oldest continuous human populations on Earth. Modern genetic analysis has shown that mainland Southeast Asians, including Thai populations, carry a detectable proportion of ancestry related to the Andaman founder population. The proportion is small, typically between 2 and 8% in Thai populations, but its presence documents a connection to the very earliest phase of modern human dispersal out of Africa that is extraordinary in its depth. When you are looking at that component in a DNA ancestry result from northeastern Thailand, you are looking at a genetic thread that runs back 60,000 years to a population that diverged from the main African exodus before most of the rest of humanity had even left the continent. These people, whom geneticists refer to broadly as the Australo-Melanesian founding population of Southeast Asia, were present in what is now Thailand before the agricultural revolution that transformed the region beginning approximately 5,000 years ago. What replaced them, or more accurately what mixed with them, came from the north. The most Yangtze genetic migration into mainland Southeast Asia during the Holocene period came from the Yangtze River Valley in what is now southern China. Beginning approximately 5,000 years ago, farming populations carrying a genetic signature associated with the spread of Austroasiatic and later Thai-Kadai languages began moving southward along river valleys into the mainland Southeast Asian peninsula. These were not raiders or conquerors in the conventional sense. They were farmers, bringing rice agriculture with them, and their demographic expansion was driven by the simple arithmetic of food production. farming populations grow faster than hunter-gatherer populations. Over centuries and millennia, the genetic contribution of the farming migrants came to dominate the ancestry of much of mainland Southeast Asia. The Tai-Kadai language family, which includes the Thai language that Lisa grew up speaking, originated in a population cluster associated with what is now Guangxi Province in southern China and the adjacent regions of northern Vietnam and Laos. The ancestors of the Thai people, in a genetic sense, were not originally from the geographic territory that is now called Thailand. They arrived in waves over roughly 2,000 years, mixing with the populations they encountered, absorbing and being absorbed in the way that all migration events in human history actually work when you examine the genetic record rather than the nationalist mythology. The kingdom of Sukhothai, traditionally considered the first major Thai kingdom, was founded in the 13th century of the Common Era. By that point, the population of the central Thai plains had already accumulated genetic contributions from Austroasiatic-speaking populations related to the Khmer of Cambodia and the Mon of Burma, from Tai-Kadai migrants from the north, from older Australo-Melanesian founding populations, and from maritime trading networks that had been bringing people and genes from India, the Malay Peninsula, and coastal China for at least 2,000 years. Buriram province specifically was a center of Khmer civilization before it became part of what we now call Thailand. The Phnom Rung Historical Park in Buriram contains one of the most significant Khmer temple complexes outside of Cambodia, built between the 10th and 13th centuries of the Common Era. The genetic and cultural legacy of Khmer civilization in the Isan region means that people from Buriram carry, on average, a higher proportion of genetic ancestry associated with ancient Khmer populations than people from the central Thai plains or the southern peninsula. This distinction matters when you are trying to understand what the DNA of someone born in Buriram actually represents. The Khmer genetic signature itself is a layered thing. The Khmer Empire at its height, from approximately the 9th through the 15th centuries of the Common Era, encompassed a territory covering much of what is now Cambodia, Thailand, Laos, and Vietnam. The population of that empire was itself the product of thousands of years of mixture between Austroasiatic-speaking farmers who had arrived from the north, Australo-Melanesian founding populations who had preceded them, and coastal populations with genetic ties to the Austronesian expansion that had distributed a related genetic signature across maritime Southeast Asia, the Pacific Islands, and Madagascar. This is a detail that stops most people when they encounter it for the first time. The Austronesian expansion, which spread out of Taiwan approximately 4,000 years ago and eventually populated Polynesia, New Zealand, Hawaii, and Easter Island, also sent migrants westward across the Indian Ocean to the coast of Africa. The people who settled Madagascar are genetically approximately half Austronesian and half Bantu African. The Austronesian component of Malagasy ancestry traces back to the Malay archipelago, which itself shares genetic ancestry with mainland Southeast Asian populations, including those of Thailand. The thread connecting a woman born in Buriram province to the genetic landscape of an island off the coast of Africa is real, documented in peer-reviewed population genetics, and represents one of the most remarkable chapters in the story of human migration. The Austronesian connection extends further than Madagascar. The same genetic expansion that carried people from Taiwan to the Indian Ocean also carried people eastward to Polynesia, and then, approximately 700 years ago, to New Zealand. The Maori people of New Zealand trace their ancestry to Polynesian voyagers, who themselves trace their ancestry back to the Austronesian expansion from Taiwan. The genetic signature that connects Thai populations to the Austronesian world creates, through that chain of migrations, a measurable biological relationship between people born in northeastern Thailand and the indigenous peoples of the Pacific. It is not a close relationship in terms of DNA percentage, but it is a real relationship, and it exists because human beings 4,000 years ago were building and sailing canoes across open ocean in ways that connected populations separated by thousands of miles of water. None of this appears in conventional celebrity biographical coverage. It is not the kind of story that entertainment journalism is equipped to tell, but it is the actual story of what the DNA of someone with Lisa's geographic ancestry represents. The Indian contribution to Thai genetic ancestry is another layer that receives almost no attention outside specialist literature. Beginning approximately 2,000 years ago, maritime trade networks connected the coastal populations of mainland Southeast Asia to the Indian subcontinent in ways that produced not just cultural exchange, but genetic mixture. The Indianization of Southeast Asia, as historians call the process by which Indian cultural, religious, and linguistic influences spread across the region, was accompanied by the physical movement of people. Indian traders, priests, administrators, and craftsmen settled in coastal cities along the Thai Peninsula and the Gulf of Thailand. Their genetic contribution to the Thai population is measurable in modern DNA studies, typically appearing as South Asian ancestry in the ranges that genetic testing companies would categorize as Indian subcontinent. This South Asian component is distributed unevenly across Thailand. It is higher in the southern peninsula, where maritime trade routes brought more sustained Indian contact, and lower in the northeastern ASEAN region. But it is present across the Thai population at levels that reflect 2,000 years of mixture, and it connects Thai genetic ancestry to the broader genetic landscape of South Asia, in ways that include connections to populations as genetically distant from each other as Iranians, Central Asian steppe peoples, and the ancient Indus Valley civilization, whose descendants are still present in the genetic record of the Indian subcontinent. The Chinese genetic contribution to Thai ancestry is substantial, and it operates on multiple timescales simultaneously. The ancient Thai Kadai migration from southern China represents one layer. But there is also a more recent layer associated with the migration of Han Chinese traders and laborers into Southeast Asia, beginning in the 17th century and intensifying through the 19th and early 20th centuries. By the time Thailand modernized its economy in the 20th century, a significant proportion of the Thai population, particularly in urban Bangkok, carried substantial Han Chinese ancestry from these more recent migrations. Estimates based on genetic surveys suggest that between 10 and 30% of the Bangkok population carries significant recent Chinese ancestry, with the proportion higher in certain economic and social strata. Lisa's family background has not been publicly analyzed through formal DNA testing in any documented way that has been released for public discussion. What has been publicly noted is that she has a European stepfather, Marco Bruskweiler, a Swiss chef who married her mother. A step-parent's genetics do not alter a child's biological ancestry, but the cultural exposure to European heritage that came with her family environment is part of the biographical context in which her genetic ancestry exists. What formal DNA ancestry testing would reveal for someone with her geographic background, based on population-level genetic studies of northeastern Thailand and the Isan region specifically, would likely show a profile broadly consistent with the following: a majority component associated with mainland Southeast Asian ancestry, primarily the Thai Kadai and Austroasiatic genetic clusters that dominate the Thai genetic landscape. A significant component associated with ancient East Asian ancestry, reflecting the Yangtze River Valley farming migration that brought the ancestors of the Thai-speaking population south over the past 5,000 years. A measurable component associated with the ancient Australo-Melanesian founding populations of Southeast Asia, which survives in the genetic record at levels typically ranging from 5 to 15% in northeastern Thai populations. A smaller but detectable component associated with South Asian ancestry, reflecting the long history of Indian Ocean trade and cultural exchange, and depending on the specific family history, components reflecting the regional Khmer genetic signature that is elevated in the Buriram area compared to other parts of Thailand. What that profile means, when you trace it backward through time, is a biological connection to virtually every major chapter of human prehistory in the Eastern Hemisphere. The Australo-Melanesian component traces to people who were walking along the coastlines of South Asia 50,000 years ago, following the shoreline of an ocean that the last ice age had lowered by hundreds of feet compared to today, finding their way into a continent that no member of their species had ever entered. The East Asian component traces to farmers in the Yangtze Valley who were cultivating rice at a time when the pyramids of Egypt were still 1,000 years in the future. The South Asian component carries within it the genetic echoes of the Indus Valley civilization, one of the largest and most sophisticated urban cultures of the ancient world, whose writing system has never been deciphered and whose political and economic organization remains poorly understood. This is what DNA reveals about ancestry, when the question is asked seriously rather than casually. It reveals not a single origin point, not a neat national identity, but a palimpsest of human movement and mixture stretching back tens of thousands of years across half the planet. The K-pop industry that brought Lisa to global attention is itself a phenomenon with a complex genetic subtext that almost no one discusses. South Korea is one of the most genetically homogeneous nations on Earth by conventional population genetics measures, a product of its peninsula geography and history of relative isolation from large-scale immigration. But Korean genetic homogeneity is relatively recent. Ancient DNA studies from the Korean peninsula show a genetic transition approximately 1,000 to 2,000 years ago, when incoming East Asian farming populations substantially replaced or mixed with older hunter-gatherer populations whose ancestry was more closely related to ancient Siberian and Japanese Jomon groups. The global reach of K-pop, which has distributed Korean cultural products to audiences in Thailand, Southeast Asia, Latin America, Africa, and everywhere else, represents a kind of cultural migration operating in the opposite direction from the genetic migrations that created the populations now consuming it. Lisa is perhaps the most visible embodiment of that intersection. She is genetically Southeast Asian in her ancestry, culturally Korean by training and professional formation, and globally legible in a way that neither identity alone would have produced. The Thai royal family's genetic history adds another layer of context to the broader picture of Thai ancestry. The Chakri dynasty, which has ruled Thailand since 1782, has Chinese ancestry through several branches of the royal lineage, reflecting the mixed origins of the Bangkok elite that developed during the same period when Hokkien and Teochew Chinese merchants were establishing themselves as a major economic force in the city. This royal genealogy is relevant not because Lisa has any connection to it, but because it illustrates how thoroughly the distinctions between Thai and Chinese ancestry, which feel culturally significant, are genetically blurred across the entire Thai social spectrum. A genetic study of mainland Southeast Asian populations published in the journal Nature in 2022, drawing on ancient DNA samples from approximately 200 individuals spanning the past 8,000 years, documented the sequence of genetic change across the region with a resolution that had not been possible in earlier research. The study confirmed the dominant role of Yangtze River Valley ancestry in shaping modern mainland Southeast Asian genetics, while also documenting survival of ancient founder population ancestry at levels higher than previously estimated. It also confirmed something earlier studies had suggested but not fully quantified. Mainland Southeast Asians, including Thai populations, carry a measurable proportion of Denisovan ancestry. The Denisovans were a sister group to Neanderthals who lived across Asia until approximately 50,000 years ago. Their existence was unknown until ancient DNA extracted from a finger bone found in a Siberian cave in 2010 revealed them. People from Southeast Asia, carry more Denisovan ancestry than people from anywhere else on Earth outside of Papua New Guinea and Aboriginal Australia. The ancestors of the Thai people interbred with Denisovans during the long migration eastward, and that genetic contribution has been carried forward into the present. That persistence is the most remarkable finding of modern population genetics as applied to Southeast Asia. It means that the DNA of a person born in Buriram province in 1997 carries within it, invisibly, and without any cultural acknowledgement. The genetic signature of people who were navigating the coastlines of Asia before the ice ages ended, before agriculture existed, before anything we would recognize as civilization had begun. The 40,000-year human presence in what is now Thailand left genetic traces that survived every subsequent migration, every agricultural expansion, every empire, every colonial contact, and every modernization. Those traces are present in every Thai person alive today, in proportions large enough to be detected by modern sequencing technology. This is the story that DNA reveals about ancestry. When the question is asked at the right scale, not the 300 years that national identity tends to focus on, not even the 2,000 years of recorded Thai history, but the full 50,000 years of human presence in the region. The entire arc of the species moving through and mixing in a landscape that was already ancient when the first cities were built. Lisa's global fame is, among other things, a window into a genetic history that the entertainment coverage of her career has never examined, and that her audiences in 150 countries are almost entirely unaware of. The woman performing on stages in Paris, Los Angeles, and Seoul is the biological product of every migration, every mixture, every survival event that brought human beings through Southeast Asia over 50 millennia. The specific combination of ancestries that produced her is unique to her. The deep history behind those ancestries is shared with hundreds of millions of people across the region who will never be famous and whose genetic story will never be told individually, but is, in its broad outlines, the same story. The archives of human genetics are still being built. Ancient DNA studies from Southeast Asia are producing new findings every year, and each new finding revises the picture in ways that add complexity rather than simplifying it. The story of where the Thai people come from, genetically, is not finished being told. Neither is the story of what that ancestry means for individuals who carry it into a globalized world where national identity, cultural identity, and genetic identity are increasingly difficult to align. Lisa's DNA carries a history that is older than any country that currently claims her, older than Thailand, older than the concept of Southeast Asia, older than writing, older than agriculture, older than everything that the word civilization usually refers to. That history is in every cell. It does not appear on any stage. It does not get mentioned in any interview, but it is there, and it is extraordinary. And the science to read it has only existed for a handful of years. What DNA revealed about Lisa's ancestry is not a single surprise. It is 50,000 years of human persistence, migration, and survival compressed into a biological record that modern science can now, for the first time in history, actually read. That is what makes it worth knowing, not the celebrity, the history behind the person. From her origins in Buriram province to stages across the world, Lisa's journey mirrors the ancient genetic movement of people across Southeast Asia, carrying 50,000 years of migration in her DNA. The Thai, Khmer, Chinese, South Asian, and Australo-Melanesian threads woven into her ancestry represent one of the most layered genetic histories on the planet. The science is still catching up to how remarkable that story actually is.